Hey everybody, welcome to Preaching Donkey. My name is Lane and we have a video for you today about why great preachers have a balance between intensity and relief. This channel is all about helping you preach with more effectiveness and more impact than you've ever preached with before. We're all about helping preachers communicate better here at Preaching Donkey, so every video is about that. Hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking about the content. We'd love to interact with you there. Now, on to today's topic. Why great preachers have a balance between intensity and relief. For your sermons to be most effective, you have to have a balance of intensity and relief. You have to have a balance of moments of great intensity where you're really driving the point home, and then moments of relief where people are able to breathe. This is the way communication works best. I saw an interview once with Mel Gibson talking about producing The Passion of the Christ, and he said something pretty interesting. He talked about how the movie was so intense. I mean, it was about the death of Jesus. It was about the passion of Jesus, the literal suffering and beating and scourging and pulling his beard and mocking him and spitting upon him, hours and hours of that, and then crucifying him on the cross. So pretty intense movie and a pretty intense hour and a half or 2 hours or 2.5 hours, however long the movie was. So he knew as a director and as a writer that the audience could only take so much. I mean, everybody was there to see a realistic depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus. Everybody knew what they were getting into. But even with that, he just knew that people can only take so much. So if you watch the movie, you'll notice that he goes back and forth between a really intense crucifixion scene, and then he'll go back in time and he'll show a lighthearted scene of Jesus as a young man building a chair as a carpenter with his mom. You know, taking some creative license to show, hey, Jesus was a real person and here's what he did. And the way he described that was, he said it was like holding the viewer's hand through the process, taking them on the journey and saying, we're going to have some real intensity and then we're going to give you some relief so you can breathe. And those moments of relief actually enable the viewer to handle and to engage with the moments of intensity. So if it's all intense the entire time, people tend to back away. So when you preach, you want to keep this idea in mind. This is just a very simple idea for today. That if you preach with all intensity all the time, where you're passionate and you're intense and you're heavy, well, guess what? Those moments of passion and intensity and heaviness really lose their effectiveness because people become used to the noise. I heard Tim Keller talk one time about a house that he went and visited this guy, and there was a train track right by the house. And he said the train came by and it was really loud, shook the whole house. And Tim said something to the owner of the house. He said, man, the train was crazy. And the owner of the house said, what train? It was like, I don't even hear it anymore. Right? So the guy was making a pretty incredible point that this train that rumbles the whole house and it's so intense, he's become so used to that noise that it's just commonplace. He doesn't really even hear it anymore. And that can happen in your sermons if it's all intense all the time. So you want to build in moments of relief for your people, kind of hold their hand along the way so that it's not just all intense and I'm making a strong point. There's time for that. But for those to have the strongest punch and the most effectiveness, you want to make sure that you're giving people the relief that they need. In his book, Preaching, the Art of Narrative Exposition, which I'll link to in the show notes, Calvin Miller quotes Eugene Lowry talking about this issue. He gives some comment that I think will be really helpful for us as we move forward. Eugene Lowry, in discussing his famous narrative loop, speaks of preachers intentionally letting up on the tension and creating a moment of relief in the tension. Dramatic and passionate preaching may establish a tight bond between preacher and listener, but it doesn't do much for the humanity and relationship that ought to characterize the best conversational style. Only when passion and relief are interchanged and juxtaposed does the sermon achieve its best rapport with the listeners. All scream and no cream is not good preaching, nor is a namby-pamby, droning conversational style. The sermon, like life, must come at us in a variety of modes. So that's from Calvin Miller, the book Preaching, page 113. He's saying, look, you've got to vary it up. You got to have moments of intensity and maybe passion, and where you're speaking fast and you're reaching out and grabbing people, and then you've got to lighten up. Maybe insert some humor. Maybe slow down what you're saying. Maybe give people a reason to lean in instead of push back. Intensity and relief. And like most things, balance is the key. So raise your voice when you preach. That's fine, but not all the time. If a preacher yells every word, there's a diminishing return. Just like if I were to write a letter to you in all caps, there's nothing more jarring than seeing a letter that's just nothing but all caps, or an email that's all caps and bold and italicized. The intent to emphasize the whole letter means that none of the letter really got emphasized because it's all so overwhelming. You don't want your preaching to be like that. So raise your voice. Lower your voice. Increase the pace and then slow the pace. Pause dramatically and then keep talking. Use humor, but then be intense. Just be sure to vary your approach. Effective preaching takes into account the complexity of human emotion. It also takes into account the fact that people come in and out of paying attention to you. So people are giving you their attention, and then things are taking that attention away. And if you're one tone the entire time, if you're just kind of conversational, and I love conversational preaching, I have a post on that, I have a video on that, but if you're just kind of, hey, we're having a conversation, that doesn't really do it, because they're going to attend to something else. So you want to be conversational, and you want to be intense, and you want to give relief. The key is to be varied, not sporadic and crazy, in a natural way that fits in your voice, but varied enough so that it's interesting and it brings people back into paying attention to you. So, to sum things up, great preaching has a balance of intensity and relief. And in your preaching, be sure to use all kinds of different intensity, all kinds of different tone, all kinds of different levels of severity and heaviness, but also lightheartedness and humor. And I think if you do that, what you'll find is that people will be more engaged and more inclined to listen when it's intense, and tune in and lean in when you relieve that tension, because it'll be more like a real conversation where things happen naturally and not just all intense or not intense at all. So that's what we have for you today. Put a comment in the comment section. Let me know, how have you experimented with varying the levels of intensity in your preaching? I would love to hear. Hit that subscribe button. Definitely hit the like button if you like this. Share it, and we'll see you next time. Remember, if God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through you. We'll see you next time.